off at was that, I asked you about your day one of creativity. Have you always been creative? You wrote 25 books. Did it just happen along the way? Did you know early on and all that good stuff?
I guess I did. I used to, when I was young, I guess I was about 7 years old, I used to illustrate my own fashion designs. And my grandfather, who was in the dress manufacturing business, my mother showed them to him. And he said, "Oh, she must have copied them." And I insisted that they were original, and he didn't believe me, but they were. So I guess it's always been there.
So wait, you were, he didn't believe that they were original? That you're
Yes, he
coming out
didn't
of your
believe
head?
them because they were so good that he thought they looked like a professional illustrator or fashion designer's creations.
Nice. And you said he was in the industry at the time?
Yes, he was in the industry. I did want to be a fashion designer, but one of my professors in college dissuaded me.
Why is that?
He, I don't want to insult any fashion designers because I know better now, but he thought that I was too much of an intellectual to go that route. But he was a painter and he was kind of a snob. So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
he, he can,
When I did my undergrad, I had an advisor kind of stir me away from my first job that I wanted to do, and I don't know if you know this story, but I was trying to do sports management before I did PE in my undergrad, and I went to the advisors and sat down with your scheduling and what classes you're going to take for the semester and all that. They said, "Well, what do you plan to do?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to work in sports in some fashion, as far as like a director, facility manager, something along those routes." And he goes, "Well, who do you know in sports?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know really anybody besides just people in my high school or whatever like that." He goes, "Well, you're never going to get a job." And I was like, "What?" And until this day, I let it stir me away from uh, even pursuing that path, that career path. And he was known to be an advisor like that, just to kind of stir away from people's dreams and stuff. But I got my I don't want to say revenge, but I did finally do some internships in sports and did a couple of different jobs with it, and ended up getting my degree or master's degree in sports management. So I guess joke's on him now. But I didn't. He is right to an extent that a lot of the to get a job in sports, it's all about who you know and your background. But it's also like that with a lot of other jobs too, not only sports. So, but yeah, I've been down that road before.
but you learn to network. A lot of
Exactly.
professions are like that, as you say. But that's a terrible thing to say to a young person. I mean, he really shouldn't be an advisor. That's an awful thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would never say that.
Yeah, it's just, and I don't know what it is that some people like to shoot down dreams, and I'm not saying that he was wanting to shoot down dreams or shoot down anything. I think that was just, I don't know if you want to call it his philosophy, his experience in life and whatever, but sometimes I've talked on here before, growing up and going through my life experience and life path, that sometimes when you talk about dreams and showing that, hey, I want to be an astronaut or something, you're immediately shot down as a kid, as well. And that's not, I'm generally speaking, I'm not saying that's everybody, but it's more just like, well, what are the odds of that happening? It's just, well, I don't know, but I'd like to do it. But then when somebody stirs you away from it, rains on your parade, it instantly alters your thinking, or it does for me anyway, or it did at the time.
But it didn't deter you ultimately. So that's
No,
great.
yeah, it's just, it's one of those things that you keep pushing forward, and like, well, I can do things. It's might not going to be the most easiest route, but if I'm a firm believer, if you really want to do something, you can. It's just a matter of, it's going to be a different route, it's going to be a different path, and you might not go the same way as I don't know, like Jerry West or some big time person like that, but it can happen if you don't mind going through obstacles and a couple bumps across along the way and being told like
Oh,
you can't do something. So
oh, absolutely. In my new book, the one behind me, I tell the story about a friend of mine who was an attorney, and she became an attorney because she was pragmatic. She really wanted to go into the arts. She's talk about creative, she's an incredibly creative person. And she retired early. And when she retired, she started looking into creative things to do. She took dance classes and she became a docent at an art and design museum. And she would express herself by wearing different fashions, really creative choices on the street. And one day, this guy stopped her on the street in Manhattan and he said, "Can I take your photograph?" And that was kind of like a little scary. And she thought about it. And then she said, "Okay." And he turned out to be a photographer. And now she's a fashion influencer in retirement. I mean, at 50 plus, and she does TV commercials, and
Wow.
she's a runway model at the age of 50 plus. So, like in her second career, she's doing what she always wanted to do.
Wow. Yeah. Age is just a number. And somebody else was telling me a story like that as far as writing that I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but she always wanted to be a writer. And it wasn't until 50 something. And then I've forgotten, she finally started publishing books and got noticed. And now she's like a multi-millionaire or something. And it was like, yeah, just so you didn't get it, early on, like the success at right after college or whatever. If you just kind of a part of luck and a part of hard work, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
magic happens. But that's cool. I've seen people or read stories like that when people in Manhattan, they take pictures of random people and then all of a sudden they blow up, and it's really cool. And yeah, I love those type of stories that, when you never know how your life is just going to change just by walking down the
Mm-hmm.
street or whatever, then yeah, now, like you said, now she's a runway model and
Yeah.
fashion
I
influence.
mean, yeah, at second career in early retirement. It just, an amazing career because she followed a creative path, uh, and followed a dream that didn't happen earlier
Yeah. Yeah.
because she was pragmatic.
In your experience, do like kind of what I was saying, do a lot of people put down the arts in a way? And I guess
Um,
what I'm getting at is that, I've had family members and, other friends who actually went into graphic design or majors in art or whatever. And then all of a sudden, some people will just, what are you going to do with that? You can't make money by being in arts, but it's not true, obviously. But yeah, I guess is that kind of what I don't want to say cultural norm or a narrative, but a lot of people seem to put
yeah.
down the arts.
Yeah, it really is. I really feel for students who want to go into fine arts. It doesn't happen as much with my students in graphic design and in creative side of advertising, but even then, a lot of families don't know what that means. Although students graduate making more than I do. My students are making a lot of money.
Sure.
And this is anecdotally, I mean, we have an amazing program. This is anecdotal data. We have 98% employment. I mean, I have agencies calling me saying, "Can you send me somebody?" And I'm like, "I don't have anybody left to send you." They get jobs immediately. So families really don't understand. But we have applied programs. In other words, graphic designers and art directors do have professions.
Sure.
They're not painters or sculptors. But you're absolutely right. People really don't understand. They see it as, la boheme. You're living this bohemian life with no way to make a living, whereas my students are doing extraordinarily well.
Yeah, I read a couple stories that I forgot one student you had that was the only one actually sharing ideas and on your biography, and it's like it was one great idea after the other compared to everybody else. And
Yeah, she's I mean, I have students. If you follow, if we connect on LinkedIn, you can see all these success stories of very young people doing extraordinarily well. Senior vice presidents. We have people who own ad agencies. I mean, they just do extraordinarily well.
Do you think, a lot of people shut it down is just because they didn't really grow up with it and it's kind of a new thing to them, especially in today's age where, everything can be graphic design as far as, creating YouTube, like you said, fashion, making logos for people, being a freelance person on Fiverr and growing up in the 50s and 60s. I mean, as far as in my knowledge of it, you ever watch the show Mad Men? I mean, that was like, as far as as far as graphics and creating things, that's all you ever really saw as far as marketing and everything. So you think that's just kind of what it is? It's just new to them and they haven't explored all the possibilities people can go down with the arts, I guess, especially in today's age.
Well, yeah, even the students who come in as majors to our program don't even realize the vastness of the industry,
Yeah.
all the different careers that are possible. So, yeah, I mean, they really don't understand all the possibilities. Yeah, it's really, and then you see the shows like that, and it looks kind of frightening. You know, but it's really a very wonderful career. I've been in and out of it. I consult in the industry, and I would be in it full time, except that I so love to teach that teaching always, every time I think I'll leave teaching to go into the industry full time, teaching just pulls me back in.
Was that always your plan, was to be a teacher and to teach it?
Um, that was my mother's plan. My mother's plan was for me to be a grade school teacher.
Oh.
And I tried student teaching when I was in college, and that was not for me at all. There were way too many issues for young children that I didn't like at all. And then I went on for graduate school and went into industry. And then in graduate school, I had a teaching fellowship. So I got to teach a course in color theory. And I just really, really loved it. And I loved teaching in higher education. I mean, you're teaching adults.
Mm-hmm.
There are no issues. Everybody's quiet, everybody's listening, everybody's interested, everybody wants to be there. And it was a very different experience. And so I went in and out of industry, and then I got a full-time teaching job, and I just fell in love with it.
What do you have a particular philosophy that you teach as far as that you stick with, and what is it? And how did you come up with it also?
I do. I run a very open, active classroom. In fact, my classroom is so open and active that they moved me out of one floor where we were too noisy, and they put me in a closed room on another floor. Because my students are too noisy. It's very, very active, very participatory. I don't think I lecture for more than 10 minutes, which I think is not the norm at all. And the students work in groups and in teams. And if you read any of my student evaluations, and what a way to spend your time, they'll tell you that I'm very respectful of students, and I really listen and care about them and care about what they say, and really try to think about them as individual artists and thinkers, and try to have each person blossom in their own way. I don't impose my sense of design or art direction on them. I allow them to blossom in their own right. And I find that seed in them and let it grow.
Yeah.
And I let them, there's a lot of play, and that's why we're noisy and nobody wants to be near us. So there's a lot of play in my classroom.
Yeah, those are the best times that I remember, with having, certain classes like that where you could have openness and activeness, like you're saying, and not just sit up there and just watch, or sit there and watch the professor read off a PowerPoint. And I'm not dismissing any of that by any means. I mean, there's, I guess, some pros to that. But yeah, the best way I learned, though, is that type of situations is, talking by doing and learning from other people. And I love that sounds like you give students the tools to do whatever they want, and then go out on their own. Like you said, you plant the seed, and let them make it grow. And that's the type that I like, is like learning by doing and learning from my mistakes. And, if I do something that's not normal, it's like, oh, wait, that's okay though. That's okay to think like that, or that's okay to, you said color theory. I don't even know what that is, but I'm using something other than color theory, and that's what's fun.
One of my students, she's in a summer internship at a top agency in LA. And we checked in this week, and they had other interns all on a project. And she checked in to tell me that the creative director chose hers. And she told me that everybody else, all the other interns, ran off and just started illustrating and drawing and doing something. And she said, but I used your method. I started working backward the way you taught me. and I looked for an insight. And I came up with this very interesting idea that the creative director loved, and she chose mine. And I have to tell you, I had to not let her see, but I started to cry when she, and I don't want to cry now, but when she told me that. And she was so excited that here at this, I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name of the agency, but this top agency in LA, they picked hers.
So when you just said that, you taught her to work backwards, is that kind of like reverse engineering to a certain extent?
Yeah. Oh, very good. Yes, Chris. Yeah.
Well, I got that from, and I don't mean to cut you off, but do you know who Bob Lazar is?
No.
So he's one of those guys who worked at Area 51 and, claims he's, seen aliens and stuff. And we don't have to talk about aliens or anything, but in his documentary or whatever, when he was talking about when they found, these UFOs, or something from not this planet, they had him reverse engineering the technology. And so that's what kind of triggered my brain. It's like, ooh, work backwards, reverse engineering. It's got to be kind of the same thing. So yeah, but let's explain that to people, or you explain your thoughts on that.
Well, working backward in the way that I teach it is that you don't problem solve. If they give you a problem, you don't immediately start solving that problem that they've given you, but you go back and you start finding other problems, like what else can I do? And you start thinking about the audience, and you think about the brand, and you start thinking about prompts and other ways, and reverse engineer, as you said, the problem, break it down and see what else can be done. It's a very long process, but in other words, you don't immediately start problem solving, which is what most people do.
Sure.
You don't just jump in, but you really break it down, and you look for other avenues. You kind of try to find the problem rather than solve the problem. I'm not explaining it that well because it's really complicated.
It's okay.
And it takes a lot of training. But she started out by looking for an insight. So when in advertising, you really want to find an insight into the audience and what makes people tick. So for example, I'm sure your audience knows the Dove Real Beauty campaign. It's been running for about 20 years in different iterations. Dove was one of the first brands that didn't use supermodels about 20 years ago. And they had, and the insight for the Real Beauty campaign came when somebody on the team noticed that on social media, women were talking trash about themselves. That only 2% of women think that they're beautiful.
Interesting.
And it's really interesting. And that was an insight that nobody had noticed before and tapped into.
That seems like a really small number, or 2%.
Sorry?
I'm sorry. I was just thinking out loud that 2%. I would have thought, I don't know. The number doesn't seem. I guess it's correct, obviously, but I would have thought. I don't know. I don't really know what my thouts are. So
that's 20 years ago, before they launched this campaign.
I'm with you now.
Yeah, and they really tried to help change that conversation, right?
Sure.
Or for example, the brand Always, feminine hygiene product. They took a term like runs like a girl, things that you do like a girl. Well, in fitness, hit like a girl, run like a girl. And they tried to change the meaning of like a girl in sports.
I see.
So the insight was that girls felt bad when people would say, "Oh, you do it like a girl," or even if they said it to a boy that you run like a girl, or you hit like a girl, right? That's an insult.
Sure.
So when advertising, when you look for that insight, you're hitting on something that people can relate to and that resonates. And that's part of working backward, where you're looking for this insight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as you were talking, I was just thinking that, we're always taught, if there's a problem, you got to solve it. You got to solve it immediately.
Right.
And that's, I guess, the traditional format, which, finding the problem, or like you were talking about, though, that's, completely different to me. And so something I never really thought about before. But yeah, that makes
Right.
perfect sense though. What's the problem? All right, don't solve it. Let's, find it first. And
Right. And in my book, The New Order of Ideas, I give a whole new framework for thinking about how to get an idea, whether it's for advertising, graphic design, science, an invention. The idea that when you have a goal, whether it's to come up with an idea for an ad, or whether it's to come up with an idea for a concept car, whatever it is, or a new ball game, you look for a gap. You look for what's missing, or you look for an underserved audience. For example, there aren't that many games aimed at senior citizens. Like, where's a gap? It could be an underserved audience. It could be missing research. For example, mRNA recently was used in medicine as a carrier, wasn't really used before. So there's always a gap. What gap is there? And then if you have that goal and there's a gap, what's the gain for people? What can people get out of it? Is there something in it for people, in the environment, for the planet, for animals? If there's no gain, what's the point? If it's just profit, to me, it's not a worthwhile idea. So my whole thinking is about what's worthwhile, whether it's for individuals, society, or the planet.
would somebody probably give you pushback on that about, oh, we want it to be for profit? Who cares if it's,
Oh, sure.
yeah, who cares if it's, worthwhile for the environment?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's, how many power drinks, how many diet drinks, it's for profit.
Sure.
And that's what we're all about. But I think companies are starting to realize that especially Gen Z wants to put their money at brands that are actually doing something positive besides just selling stuff. So there's the triple bottom line of people, profit, and the planet.
Well, and especially in today's age, though, with that, we can do so much more research into a company and actually knowing, as far as studies and knowing what their products are actually doing, is it actually, giving off the attributes that they actually claim, that they are saying that,
Right.
I've said before on here that, I forgot, like, sugar used to, control some kind of studies and to say, no, it's not sugar causing some kind of diseases, whatever. It's actually meat, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And just that it's become, I guess, obviously people are aware of it, but I think, back in the day, if you would have told me, if you drink Coke every day for the rest of your life, you'll be okay and you'll live to 100, but now it's got more research out there and people can do their own research and studies. And like I said, oh, yeah, so I probably shouldn't drink a Coke all the time. So nothing against Coke, but we're finding out you shouldn't put that much sugar in your body.
Yes, that's right. And people can really go on to companies' websites and see what they are doing for what their values are and what their mission is, and what they are doing, if they have any foundations. In other words, if they're giving to charities, are they helping support clean water, or helping causes of no poverty or sustainability? So we can always check and see if they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, I like how you bring that out. It's just that I want it to be worthwhile and something positive rather than just for money. Just because I think that's also a misconception that like I said, people would give you pushback. No, it's like, why are you doing it if it's not for money or whatever? We gotta, and I guess there is a place for money and everything, but it's also, I would feel like I would get more out of something that, you're changing something for the better, especially with so many problems, so many issues in today's world, that it's like, hey, I'm actually helping out. And, like, for example, this podcast, if I was doing it for the money, I would be doing it for all the wrong reasons in my eyes, and that it would never take off, I think, just because it's not worthwhile to me for the money. I didn't do it for the money. I like having these conversations. This is fun. I learned something new, and it's part of my learning experience and my growth, I guess. And that I think some people start things for the money, and that's kind of one of the reasons they fail sometimes, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, they're doing
You're doing it for a passion. It's a passion.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess it is. I never really thought of it as a passion, but I always listen, I got tired of listening to music all the time, like at work, and I wanted something different. And I remember like listening to my first podcast, back in like 5, 6 years ago, and I got so much more out of it just listening to other people's stories and, like listening to their philosophies on thing and their takes. I was like, wow, yeah. So yeah, and I was like, I guess you could say it's a passion, yeah. And I wanted to explore it, and see what happens.
Well, you're a people person. I mean, you're great at this. You're such a great conversationalist. So I mean, maybe passion's the wrong word, but you're so interested in people.
Yeah,
and you followed your interest.
Yeah, and that's and kind of like we were saying that I wanted to do something not only for me, but and I've said it on here 100 times. But if 99 people hate this episode, but at 99 out of 100 people hate this episode, but one person enjoyed it and they said something about it, it's like, wow, that's great. That makes me feel good because I pick up pearls and gems from listening to people and even stuff like yourself. Listen to like the way your philosophy on how you teach and everything. It's like, wow, that's so cool. And I feel like other people need to know that and want to know that and open up their minds.
Thank you.
Yeah, just and like I've had a lot of people when I started this podcast. They're what are you going to talk about or what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I thought I had this like almost creative instinct, and I don't want to. Well, maybe instinct's the wrong word, but some kind of creativity bug in me. And I was like, well, I kind of, I like creating things, and I like, like when I was doing my logos and like putting my ideas on it. And I'm not, I had to go on Fiverr and get all that done, but stuff like that's cool. Is like making something out of nothing and turn it. Now, even like as a kid, like you were saying, like I would get on, when I was able to play video games or do something, I was like, oh, I want to create my own way and design it how I want to. It's fun. It's exciting. And even like learning Photoshop and Premiere Pro and Adobe Illustrator. Like I've dabbled in a little graphic design myself. Like all that's like I can just feel myself sparking and like something's going on crazy inside me. And it's so fun at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure that even the conversation and thinking of things to ask people and keeping a conversation flowing gets the endorphins going, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's just because like I said, we're doing a little dance and we're going back and forth and like, ooh, what is she going to say next? And like, oh, okay, now I'm listening intently. Okay, now is that going to trigger something in my head? Like the reverse engineering, and it's fun. Especially when you got a good chemistry and a good vibe and a good flow going. And yeah, you can.
Speaking of dance, you brought up the word dance. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about it when I was listening to your podcasts, that you are like a good lead dancer, because a good leader actually lets his partner shine.
Yeah.
And you do let your guests shine.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. I want them to, talk about what, their expertise is. And I want to listen. And, obviously sometimes like we were talking about before we got on here, it doesn't always, I do a lot more listening than talking, but yeah, I mean, that's why I created this. Let them shine, let them, it's not all about me. It's not, can't think of it that way, even though that's what is that little bit narcissist, but it's not always about me. I want it to be about us. And that, when we both walk away from this podcast, that it was like, oh man, that was a great conversation. I took a few pearls and gems from that. And that's awesome. But speaking of creativity and things, I wanted to say that I've had people tell me like, oh, well, I'm not creative. I can never do anything like that. But it's so like kind of what we were chatting about before. There's a lot of areas that creativity can explore. And it's just a matter of, taking a chance on something and finding it. It's like, like this is part of creativity, and like the arts, like a comedian, that's part of the arts. And like a lot, and I never used to realize that's an art form. When I think people get that norm that, oh, if you're the arts are just for paintings and sculptors, like you said, but it's not.
No, I tell people to listen to comedians, especially my advertising students, because comedians, especially observational comedians, observe life and observe people, and they notice things. And part of being creative, one of the most important traits of a creative person is to be a good observationalist, is to watch what people do. And anybody can learn to be creative. I can teach almost anyone. I mean, anybody who's interested, I can teach them how to be more creative.
Really?
And oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If they want to learn, I can absolutely teach them how to be more creative. But you're right. Really good comedians, very, very creative.
Yeah, that's one thing. As far as like when I was talking about when I listen to podcasts, I listen to a lot of comedians' podcasts just because they talk about their writing or their takes on things, and how they kind of explore, and they take a bit and they try it out a couple times, and if it's not hitting right, they go back and change it, and and it's like they just keep working with it, and they mold it into something until all of a sudden they have a special on Netflix or something. It's like, wow,
Right.
just that
Right.
process is so cool to me, and just because that's what I kind of go down with. I try to find an idea and build off of it. And here's the thing, that sometimes when I'm looking at other ideas or graphics or something, I kind of tend to think that I get stuck in a nutshell, and I'm only kind of going completely off that one, let's say, photo or logo or whatever, and I can't bounce out of that shell and get my own creativity going. Does that kind of make sense? Like I'm almost
Yeah,
stuck
people
down.
get stuck. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then they stay digging the same hole. And they should move over and dig another hole. Yeah, I always say move over and dig another hole, and get away from it and let it percolate and get other input, and think about your objectives. And there are all kinds of ways to get out of that. For your listeners, one really good creativity prompt is the question, "What if?" That's a fantastic creativity prompt. Neil Gaiman says it's one of the best questions. Author Neil Gaiman says it's one of the best questions you can ask, because you suppose different scenarios. The other one that I love is if only. So, for example, if only we had digital twins who could outlive us, who would live past us, so that all our thoughts and feelings would survive forever.
Yeah.
Or if only I could tell you what I was thinking without saying anything and not typing it. Or if only, so you could have all these certain questions will really spur your creativity. Being curious makes people more creative. So, for example, Lin-Manuel Miranda, when he was going on vacation after he wrote In the Heights and it was on off Broadway and it was about to go to Broadway, he was going on vacation to the beach in Mexico. And what book does he pick up? The Life of Alexander Hamilton. Now, not exactly to me a beach read, right?
Sure, I would think not.
Right. And there you go. Hamilton, he said that when he was reading Hamilton and he was on vacation and he was resting, the best idea of his life walked right in. So he was curious about a subject that had nothing to do with his profession.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, be curious. I mean, I listened to when I go to the museum with friends, I often say, take me where you want to go in the museum, because I'll just keep taking you to my favorite spots, but you take me so that I have a surprise. And one time my friend Richard said, oh, well, let's go look at the illuminated manuscripts, the medieval illuminated manuscripts. And I thought, oh,
Uh-oh.
I don't want to look at illuminated. But I said, okay. And they were fabulous. And I would never have gone on my own, but I went, and I was open to going,
Sure.
even though there was that moment of, oh, and I learned from it and I enjoyed it. So curiosity, being open, all of these things make us more creative.
Yeah, no, I love that because there's been times that, just like you said, that I was invited to do something or go see something, and I immediately was just like, nah, it's going to be lame or whatever. I don't want to do that. And I think, one of the most recent times was that, my mom invited me to watch some kind of musical or whatever with her, and I sat down and I was like, this is actually not bad. I don't even remember what it was. I think it was like, it might have been a documentary on the Four Seasons or something like that. And they were, don't they have a Broadway show?
Oh, Jersey Boys?
Jersey Boys. Yeah, maybe it was a documentary on them or whatever. Yeah. So I actually enjoyed it, and I was like, wow, man, why did I never really pay more attention to their music? And I think it was because when you were little, if you heard or for me, when you heard some of those songs where you was like, oh, they're not cool. That's not cool. That's not mainstream. But now, I find myself just kind of, going in the car, or even like when I'm at the gym, we kind of play older songs while we clean up and get everything, closed up for the night. And we're just dancing around. We were doing Billy Joel the other day with Uptown Girl. So yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, I've noticed it's like, oh well, let's just try it out. We ain't got to say no right off the bat. And again,
Right,
then you find
right,
something cool that you never thought of before.
right. I mean, I'm not saying you have to listen to, crazy people, but if somebody makes an interesting suggestion or even something that you normally wouldn't do, not anything dangerous, of course, but
Sure, 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 sure. Yeah.
yeah, being open and curious really does lend itself to becoming more creative.
Is that part when you said you could help people become creative? I mean, is that would be one of the first steps to get them on that creativity path?
Yes, yes. Learning how to observe more, really look at things. So let's say you're walking down the street, look at how shadows fall. Actually, look at things.
Hmm.
Look at shapes that are of buildings. Look at how people wear their scarves. I remember. I mean, I don't know if I don't know how you would know this, but I'm a dancer. Also, I'm an avid dancer, and and
Nice.
and I take a lot of dance classes, and there are people much better than me in class. And I watch them I watch hand gestures and I watch everything to learn. But you have to really look carefully to learn, right? You
Sure.
know that as a fitness person,
Sure.
you really have to look and observe to understand the movement. And so you learn how to observe carefully and mindfully, right? Or as a fitness person, you have to be very mindful of how you lift weights, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking in my head as you were talking.
So mindfulness, I mean, and it's mindful observation that can make you much more creative. So that's step one. And it's not so easy. I mean, it's practice.
Mm.
Let me say it this way. It's a practice.
Sure. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
building something
Right.
completely new that and like a new habit, and you're trying to whatever and trying to put it as part of your routine, is, for example, like you said, when we had to study, certain athletes and lifts or whatever, or not really study, but observe them and watch, like, oh, what are they doing wrong? What are they doing right? It's like, well, at first you don't really see it just because or for me, I didn't see it because I was so new to it and it's happening so quick. And then I started to learn. It's like, okay, wait, let me watch this part first. Let me just watch the hips. Okay, let me watch the bar this time. Let me watch their shoulders. It's like, oh, okay, then
Yeah.
put the pieces together. We were talking about you break it down and then you start to build off of it. Yeah.
Yes. And you learn from each different person. I mean, every time I take a dance class with a different expert, I learn something different. But as I said, it's practice, and it is a practice, meaning it becomes what you do and who you are. And the curiosity. I don't just tune out when somebody talks about medicine or science, not my field, but I'm married to a physician. I have to be interested, right?
Partly,
Right.
partly.
Yeah, and he loves to talk about politics, and I never wanted to talk about politics. It depressed me. Now, ask me anything, and I know a lot about. I mean,
Nice.
but I mean, being curious helped me talk to him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. You make that connection.
you make that connect. I mean, we got together because we both dance, but people say to me, "What do you talk to him about?" And because I'm curious, it worked out.
Yeah. Is there a style of dancing that you do?
I do. I started out as a ballroom dancer
Okay.
and Latin swing, foxtrot, all that. But now that COVID hit, can't do that much. So now I do mostly in my living room. I take online jazz and theater classes.
Nice. You just do it virtually and they just kind of teach you kind of through Zoom or something?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I did that in New York. You get really great people. You get all these
Oh,
people from Broadway and Alvin Ailey classes, and I mean, I'm right near all these amazing. I
yeah.
got to take classes with Broadway choreographers and Broadway dancers, and just very lucky
You've been dancing? Did you
location.
say you were dancing your whole life?
All my life, my father was a dancer, a professional dancer.
Impressive.
Oh, I talk about dreams. He didn't let me study dance.
Why is that? He didn't want you to go down that road?
He didn't want me to go down that road. Very tough life, very short career. you're done when you're 35 or younger. You're done.
Really?
Yeah, it's too old. You can't. I mean,
Very similar to professional sports, I guess, because most people when they hit 35, they start to say, "Well, you're on your down
yeah,
your down era.
yeah,
Not really in your prime anymore." But I didn't think about it as far as dancing, though. I guess that makes sense. It's huh.
yeah. Then you have to either become a choreographer or a teacher, but performing can't do those leaps and turns and the stamina that you need.
Yeah.
Is just, even now myself, just, I dance for an hour and a half and I'm like, wow. But yeah, if you could say poof, what would you be? I would say a dancer.
Yeah. Huh. Kind of blew my mind with that. I never really thought and sat down. Well, I never really think about dancing that much as far as making a career out of it. And I go 35, you're done. But yeah, now it just makes perfect sense that, okay, yeah. I mean, just like I said, associated with athletes. And yeah, and a lot of those guys even take, certain dances to help them as far as their movement and their, try to gain more abilities and stuff. So yeah. Huh. That's interesting. Have you always been from New York? And there's
born and bred New Yorker. You can't hear it?
Well, I'm not really good with accents, I guess. And I was just asking, or did you move there just because for the creativity part of it, and that's like a mecca as far as, like you said, fashion and and dance and everything. And I was just wondering, but yeah, as far as accents and stuff, I can catch certain words, but as far as when I'm listening, just like I just think that that's how Robin talks. No big deal. Like I went to a conference in Boston 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember when, but that was the most I could actually understand the different accents and people. And like it was so thick and hard. I was like, wow, that's that Boston accent. But before, like I don't really catch it, or I just don't really just kind of move on, because I don't really care, I guess. It's like, oh, that's fine. But people call me out on mine, but it's fine.
Well, you have a charming accent. My daughter went to study at University of Chicago, and she came back after her first semester and she said, "Mom, you have a New York accent." I said, "Oops." And she said, "You say, I don't even want to say the word, ORANGE, wrong.
Yeah.
And you say HORROR, wrong." I don't even say those words anymore.
Oh, don't blame you.
She freaked me out. It's very hard. It's really terrible when your child corrects you.
Well, I don't know about that part. I'm just a single dad of 2 dogs. So
Oh.
maybe one day I'll go down that road if it happens, but I'm not really worried about it. But let's switch gears a little bit though, as far as, the writing and, I know we talked about your dancing, but is that part of you getting your creativity out as far, kind of exploring other avenues?
I love writing now. In fact, this year during COVID, I was incredibly productive. I wrote 2 books.
Impressive.
During COVID. I would tell your listeners not to do that. The writing part was actually great. They both kind of fell out of my head, but when the books went into production, that's where it was just really got really, really hairy and very, very stressful, because production of books is very difficult when they're going to copy edit and they go to the book packager and go into design and all that. But yeah, I love to write. And going back to my daughter, she, before she went to University of Chicago, she took a summer class at Harvard in learning how to write short stories. And when she would call home, I would kind of pull information out of her. And I tried to learn how to write a short story by asking her questions. And I did. And I taught myself through her how to write short stories, and I started submitting them into literary journals, and I was accepted. And so I just love to write. And now last summer I wrote a screenplay, and I'm hoping to start working on that once. Well, I have a contract for a book with Columbia University Press, so I have to do that. But after that, I think I'm going to move to the screenplay.
Is that something you always wanted to do, was a screenplay?
I wrote one when I was in graduate school, and talk about the advisor who told you have to know somebody.
Yeah.
When I was in graduate school, somebody said, well, if you don't know anybody, you're never going to get that screenplay made or read. So that was, and that's still kind of true. You still have to kind of know somebody, but I'm going to give it a shot.
Why not? Yeah. I mean, you gotta, why not? I mean, that's one thing that, I've learned through this whole podcast journey, whatever, just take a chance. And, if it fails, then you're right. What do you have to lose? Okay. What, somebody told you no? Okay. It's not the first time. I've been rejected before. No big deal.
Right.
But don't use that as, I kind of use that as motivation, I guess. It's like, in a sense that, okay, let's move on to the next thing and keep moving forward.
Right.
If you're not forward, you're backwards, right? And you don't want to go backwards, or I don't anyway. Yeah.
No, I have to keep challenging myself. And I just love, like you said, I just love to create. I love ideas. I love figuring things out. That to me is the most exciting part. Is like some people, because I help other faculty around the country learn how to write books. And a lot of faculty find it really intimidating to write and very frustrating. And I find it very exciting because it's a puzzle, and it's your, like, the frustration is part of the fun, is that you're figuring it out. And even if it's really, really challenging, you get in there and you figure it out. And once you figure it out, it's like, wow, I just figured that out. Yeah. So I'm going to be really excited to figure out and work on a screenplay and figure out the plot. And now when I watch television and I watch movies, I reverse engineer their plots.
Nice. Yeah. I'm part of that faculty you help. I'm scared to death of writing. And I try to do it, like I've talked about on here, but I'd only do it, as far as journaling for myself or writing down my thoughts. And, and I've said it before on here, but that's what Jordan Peterson I don't know if you know who that is, but that's one of the things he's a clinical psychologist. I think he taught at Harvard for a little bit, maybe somewhere in Toronto, but it's like, hey, if you want to talk about something or have thoughts on an idea or whatever, go ahead and write them down and make 2 or 3 different arguments for them. And so I was like, well, that really made sense to me. I like doing that. And it makes me, if, like you said, if we start talking about politics or whatever, not that I want to, but I just don't go on here and just start rambling. I actually have a couple ideas that I've actually thought of, and okay, I can actually talk somewhat articulate about it. But
you're a podcaster, so you can be a writer, because it's like being a teacher. You can write. You're talking to people, so it's very similar. You're expressing yourself. Just record. I mean, you've already recorded yourself. Just
yeah, that's one of the things that I've kind of noticed is that I go back and like kind of write down my notes and thoughts on things that we talked about, and then it's helped me. And like I said, it makes more sense to me writing it down. But part of the reason I didn't go get my PhD was just because I didn't want to write a dissertation. Because I was like, man, I can't do that. And I've came to terms with it now, but at the time, like a year later after I finished, like, man, I should have just went and tried and see what happened. But I never felt like I was a strong writer, and I'm not saying that I am a strong writer, but it was just kind of intimidating at the same time. And
I wasn't a strong writer when I started, because I went through school in this gifted program, and they actually didn't teach us how to write. I never learned how to dissect a sentence. I never learned how to write a composition. I never learned how to write. I had to learn on my own. And so it's myself teaching myself.
That's awesome.
And getting better and better. And when I look at my early books, I'm like, oh no, I can't.
Yeah, that's part of the process. Like, when I started the podcast, I knew the very first episodes would probably be trash. But if I kept going, I'd get better at it and learn new things and, pick up little, quips from people like yourself. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let me try it this way now. And that's part of the, you got to be, like you were saying, you got to be a little bit open to things and not scared to try new things. And if they fail, then okay, we're back at square one, but we continue to move forward. And that's part of the creativity stuff when, like when I've helped try to create my logos or create other people's logos and stuff, it's like, okay, if that failed, if you didn't like it, okay, no big deal. We move on and we figure it out.
And writing can be very conversational. So the way you're speaking to me can be the way you write.
Yeah, that's what I try to do.
Yeah, there's no reason that writing, like a lot of academic writing, is dreadful.
Mm,
I mean, people think that it has to sound like dense, and nobody wants to read that.
exactly. Well, even in my workplace emails, when I'm working, I start to type like, "I hope this email finds you well," and I was like, "Well, yeah, I don't do that. I don't really talk to people that way." But I feel like, again, that's a workplace culture that I have to write this way, and then I've kind of learned my own style, kind of being professional but not overly professional at the same time. I guess, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just I don't want people. I want this to be me. I don't want to just say, "Yeah, I hope this email finds you well," or whatever. So
Well, Gen Z is changing it all because they don't even use periods. And in fact,
really,
well, not in emails. Well, somewhat in email. My students tell me that never to use periods while in texting because that just means you're angry.
what?
That's what they told me.
I don't know if I agree with that because I mean I've never heard that before, but I mean I've seen other things where. Sorry, my dogs are kind of barking right now, but
That's
uh, um, yeah, that makes more sense. When because I'm not a grammar king, but I know a little bit about it. And it's like, okay, we need a period there, and it's like, but this, like, cause sometimes when I start reading the text, that it's like, this makes zero sense. What are they trying to say? I have no clue. But I have heard people also make the argument that, well, you're texting, you don't have to worry about grammar. It's a text.
right.
I mean, a little bit of grammar, I think, would help. It goes a long way. You don't have to be, a full expert, but yeah. But I've never heard that before. Gen Z saying you don't use periods because you're angry.
Well, my daughter and my students keep me
Keep you
up to, keep me with it. As I know that's not with it, but
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Do you have you integrated that? I mean, do you text a lot? Do you use periods or no?
no, I wouldn't use periods. I don't want anybody to think I'm angry at them.
Oh man! All right.
Oh no, I do whatever they tell me to do.
Oh, okay. Huh. Well, I'm gonna have to talk to some other people
Yeah,
about this and get to the bottom of this about not using periods.
yeah.
Is there anything else I should know as far as I want to be with it? I want to be hip.
I know. Let me think. What else? I'll have to think about it and text you. Yeah.
Okay, that'll be good. Yeah, let me know. Just don't put a period. I don't want you to be angry with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought it was just all caps is when you were angry. Back in the day, you write in all caps.
Oh yeah. Well, then you're screaming at somebody. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. Do you think? Where do I want to go? Now I know we were talking about aliens and stuff, but we didn't really talk about it. But there's going to be a point where we don't really need to text, or we can just kind of talk without texting, I guess. I don't know if my thoughts coming out the way I want it to. Like, it's kind of like we can just kind of understand what people were talking without having to use body language, texting. It's just kind of, we just read, almost read people's minds.
Yeah. Well, I think there's going to be gestural interface sooner than we think, where you don't have to actually type, but you can. Like, Jim, did you see? It was a long time ago. Minority Report with
Tom Cruise.
An ad agency called Possible. Remember the board that he was using, and he didn't touch the board, the interface. It was gestural. He just moved his hands, and things moved.
It was very similar. In that movie.
Yeah, so that I think is going to become much more popular, but it'll also be kind of in the air. There won't actually be a hard surface that you interface with. It'll just be kind of, the cloud will be there. So I think we're moving towards so many more things. I mean, I didn't think commercial trips on rockets would be possible in the early 21st century.
Sure.
I mean, things are moving very, very quickly. I didn't think, when you watch reruns of Star Trek, I would still like to be beamed up somewhere. but all these ideas, voice, you can voice type, you can do all these voice commands. So I think a lot of things are going to happen much quicker than we anticipate.
Would you go to space if you had the chance?
No.
No interest?
No, I don't think they have dancing there.
You can take it there. You can be the first person to, but
First person to do the cha-cha and spin.
Yeah, that's like a little commercial trip. Go up there and check it out and come back.
Maybe. We'll see. I'll let some other people go first. I mean, William Shatner went and he came back okay.
He's fine, right? And then, basically Jeff Bezos kind of went to the surface of it or whatever he did a while back. But and what I was getting at was that, when people have talked about going to space and they come back and seeing the world as it is as a whole, it's like they give this whole new ideology to themselves about, wow, like this was a new perspective of things and all new meaning of, I guess, a purpose in life. And it's like, I wonder what they're actually seeing, what that's like, what that feeling is. So.
Well, I would bet. I mean, I kind of feel that when I'm on an airplane. I mean, you look down and it's just, I always think, I'm so glad nobody left this to me to figure out. I mean, I have a lot of good ideas, but if they had left electricity up to me, we'd be sitting in the dark. So I'm glad somebody else figured this all out. Would you go? Would you go on a commercial rocket?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and that's because I want to experience that, what they were talking about. And also that, it's one of those things that a lot of people, there's not many people who've been to space really. So, right. It's like, ooh, I could say I'm one of the few, and how many opportunities you get like that. Matthew McConaughey wrote a book, Green Lights, and it's always like, when opportunities come like that, I'm looking for them now. And instead of just immediately, like, when you said, being curious and open to actually see that medieval thing or whatever, well, let's go see it. That's a green light. This could be a huge opportunity for me. You never know.
You're right. Yeah, I said no too soon. I'm just not a great traveler.
It's okay. No, but I mean, a lot of people just,
like, what do you pack? I don't know.
I don't either. I don't know. I mean, depends how far we're going, I guess, or how long we're going to be away.
How many pairs of shoes can I take? I don't know. I mean, there would be really.
You can do whatever you want to, but yeah, I think it's just things like that. It's just immediate. It's just, well, why not? Let's go see what happens. Now, I'm not saying that with everything in life, but. If somebody said, let's go jump off into the Grand Canyon, like, well, no, I'm good. I'll go look at it, but I don't want to go jump off anything. So, but anyway, yeah, Robin, this has been great. Let's take this home on that right there. If people want to find you or in your books and all that good stuff, where do they do that at? Feel free to plug away.
RobinLanda.com. You can find my books on Amazon. You can find me on LinkedIn, but my website is RobinLanda.com.
Cool. Well, thanks for having a little Sunday conversation with me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. It was great, Chris.
Okay. Bye, everybody. We're out of here.